Your Name's soundtrack is one that is defined by the intense colliding with the calm. It's a soundtrack that goes from confident and punky to soft and surreal. It's a soundtrack that truly evokes emotion, and it's a soundtrack that suits its film perfectly. Unlike with the Silent Voices soundtrack, I recommend that you definitely listen through this whole thing from start to finish, leaving out only the extra tracks at the end, which are the non-movie version and the English version of the song titled Sparkle. I recommend this because, above all else, the soundtrack takes the listener on an adventure. The soundtrack starts with what I believe is a guitar recording that's been reversed, making it sound ambient but not at all out of place with the rest of the song's intensity, with the bass drum frequently slamming down on 1, 2, 3, and 4, bringing home that percussive punch that makes this punky track so wonderful. This opening track isn't particularly complicated, but it doesn't need to be. Radwimp, the band behind this soundtrack, seems masterful at playing around within a fairly simple song structure to create something interesting and memorable. This element of simplicity is prevalent throughout the entire album. The drumming isn't particularly flashy, but it almost always enhances the rest of the track. The bass playing is far from the dry, plodding, overly simple playing that frequently haunts more punky tracks such as this one. The vocals are smooth and high and soar above the crunching guitars, creating a fun track that is only strengthened by the way the vocals contrast with the rest of the instruments. The other songs that abandon, at least in part, the orchestral elements that define so much of the rest of the soundtrack are equally powerful for similar reasons. Certainly, Sparkle and It's Nothing are a bit more relaxed and sentimental sounding than Dream Lantern and Zen Zen Zensei, but the band's sound is always clear and articulate, with a polish to each of the tracks and expert mixing that allows each element to shine, without taking away from the song's dynamics. And those dynamics are what makes these tracks so fantastic. So that's the first element of the soundtrack, the rock songs, for lack of a better term. The other elements are, for the most part, the piano and the strings, with some ghostly effects applied to the tracks towards the middle of the soundtrack. The first 10 or so tracks on this album are extremely strong as a unit, because we keep moving between these different ideas between the rock parts, the piano parts, and the string parts, with other elements like the flute making their way in every once in a while just to change up the texture. The string playing ranges from drawn out and beautiful to a plucked and playful pizzicato, and there's just so much energy to it and so many new ideas getting thrown into the mix, but none of these new ideas are distracting or seemingly out of nowhere. It's all very cohesive. Unfortunately, though, none of the tracks on this album are bad by any means. Some of the tracks start to feel a bit bland towards the middle. Individually, each of them are fine. In fact, some of them are actually quite beautiful. However, there are many songs that are mostly back-to-back with their sentimental tones and a softness that is pleasant, but it just gets a little bit boring. Without some sort of contrasting, more intense instrumentals or songs to break up these moments, the soundtrack frankly starts to get a bit tedious. Of course, within the context of the film, this wasn't a problem at all. The ghostly sound many of these pieces exhibit is great at conveying a sense of loneliness that a large section towards the middle of the film demands to have. On their own, though, these pieces just start to feel a little bit too samey. However, I'm sure that many people who hold this film in exceptionally high regard won't find this to be a problem at all. These pieces made me think of the film as I listened, so if you loved the film enough, I'm sure that this would only be a delightful thing. Speaking of delightful things, if there's one track I recommend you listen to on this album, it's Kuchikamizaki Trip, a piece that embodies many of the best aspects of the soundtrack as a whole. If you like this one, you'll probably like at least large sections of the whole soundtrack. Overall, the piece gives off the impression of being trapped underwater and of fighting against the current. With its electronic, almost music box-like sounds, it evokes a feeling of nostalgia and puts the listener in a dreamlike state. If you've seen the movie and know where this piece plays, then I don't need to explain to you just how perfect this is within the context of the film. The good news is that the piece is just as exceptional and beautiful on its own, with these loud strings crashing into the soft tones of the vibraphone. This track is composed masterfully, and if there's any piece I will be returning to consistently, it's this one and the more rock-esque songs that I previously mentioned. If there is any track that is similar in this regard, it is the movie version of Sparkle, which I recommend above the other two versions of the song included on the soundtrack. Another aspect of the soundtrack that I love is how many of these pieces feel like a duet. At many points, the melody sounds like a question being followed by an answer. Considering the film's focus on two individuals and their intimate connection, this makes sense. Outside of that context, it's just simply delightful to listen to. It shows Radwimp's fantastic sense of melody and counter-melody, and their ability to create catchy but lovely tunes. In fact, Radwimp's diversity in the soundtrack cannot be understated. They've shown themselves to be masters of so many different styles, from jazzy and funky to soft and sentimental, and there's no doubt in my mind that Your Name would not have been loved by so many if not for their beautiful work on this soundtrack. If you loved the movie, this is definitely worth your time. If you didn't love the movie, this is probably still worth your time. As far as other recommendations go based on this, of course it's advisable to go check out the rest of Radwimp's work. But overall, it's kind of hard to recommend other stuff because, like I said, they just do so many different things and have so many different styles that they pump into this. Overall, though, I think people who enjoy the songs on here would be likely to enjoy Coldplay's A Rush of Blood to the Head and Jimmy Eat World's Bleed American. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please let me know down in the comments below what you think of this soundtrack, or whether you have any recommendations for me for future videos of this sort. I'm planning to do one of these every Sunday, and I'm also going to be looking into video game soundtracks, into other film soundtracks that go outside of anime. So yeah, just let me know what you would like to see. And I hope that you have a fantastic day. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.